Hello dear learners, welcome to another interesting session of Residential Design Lecture Series. Today we are on the third lecture of this design series. In this lecture we will be covering architectural design processes, relevance and its methodologies. I am architect Mansha Samreen from K.R. Mangalam University, Gurugram. So dear learners, let's begin the today's session. We will discuss today what is design process, what does it mean, why methodology matters in architecture. Design is both creative and systematic. Design is not just a one-day thing. It's an iterative process that happens with time. And the designer is someone who goes through each and every process of the whole design. And in that, the methodology is mattering the most. Design is both creative and systematic process. In architecture design, the creativity meets the scientific inquiry, and then the architect creates the marvel that he is destined to make. So objectives of today's lectures are to understand the stages of architectural design process, explore its relevance for the residential projects, learn the tools and techniques for each of the stage, applying process thinking through examples. Today we will go to step by step the process of architectural design, what it takes starting from the initiation of the concept, design, ideation, the processes that are involved throughout the design process, the technical aspects, the construction details, the material requirements, compliance to the norms and standards of the design process. All of these tools helps the designer to make a design which is safe and secure for the users. These processes will be discussed through few examples done through the master architects. So the nature of design is not a random process. It is an iterative and a non-linear process. That means iterative means that you need to go back and forth in the design journey. Once you start with an ideation, you go through the technicalities and make that ideas into actual design solutions. It's a non-linear process. Non-linear means that it's not in a straight line step-by-step process. There is no concussion that is made for a design. It is a process that each and every designer goes through step by step. And there are few steps that are standard for the design journey. So that is why it is called a non-linear process and it is an iterative process. This process is a combination of both art, science and the problem solving ability of the learners. Each user is centered and it's context driven. User centered means the design has to respond to the need and requirements of the user, why we are designing and what are the context. Context means the user need, the user preferences, what is the expectation of the user from the architect in the whole design process. That is how user centered and context driven projects are formed. Each project is unique, but the process guides the outcome. Each project has its own USP because each project is different. The client need is different, the user need is different, the overall scenario is different, the site location is different, expectations are different, and all these differences make the projects unique and the overall process becomes unique and the outcomes are guided on these processes. So all these processes, the design processes have 5 major components. The first and foremost components is the responsibility of the architect. The architect has multifaceted responsibilities. He is the single point of contact for the all design process right from its initiation to its final outcome. It is a co-creation process. It is something which is done with the user. What are the client expectation? If somebody comes to an architect to ask him to design his house, then the user need, his expectation, everybody has some ideas about their own design of the house. So it has to be a co-created approach. The inclusive perspective, the design should be including for everybody. A house is some place where all the members of the house live happily. The aim is to provide a space that is safe and secure. That is what a house means. So, inclusivity means that applying the perspective of each and every user, right from the owner of the house, maybe that person is the breadwinner, the head of the family, the grandparents, the elderlies that are living in the house, the children, the wife, and everybody that is in that space. So, inclusivity is an option which is bound to be the part of the design process, and the earlier you include all these aspects is something that makes the design much more better, and an iterative process keeps on going. The design process is also a collaborative practice. Collaborative practice means that many people are involved in working out the design. The design is not something which can be done single-handedly. So, initiation of collaboration with all the consultants, the contractors, etc., has to be done early in the process. And all these factors generate the outcome. Outcome is what is the final design of the residence, what is the final output, how the house looks, what the elevation looks like, what is the planning, what are the finishes, everything is guided by the final outcome. So, these 5 aspects of design processes need to be taken care in every step of designing. Maybe it is a residential design or maybe any other design. So, these 5 processes keep on standard. So, now learners, we will discuss each of these aspects in furthermore detail. So, aspects of the design process, first and foremost is the responsibility of the architect. Architect is the single point of contact for the whole design process. The development, the input from the community, the review from the norms and the standard practices. So, all these are done by the architects. The architects shape spaces that serves for clients, the communities and the cities. So, architect is someone who is catering to all these 3 aspects and further makes the design a place where everybody is safe, sound and happy. It is a co-creation approach. Architect has to engage with the client, the community, the professionals. The professionals are the people, the consultants who are working to make the design actually operational, to make the design functional. So, these are the consultants, these are MEP consultants, they are mechanical, engineering and plumbing consultants, the structural engineers, the surveyors, the developers. So, architect has to embark these processes with these people. So, architecture is something which helps the students, helps the professionals to come along on the same platform to create something which has much more higher meanings. So, architect's responsibility is to communicate with all the different consultants and work on the liaising. So, it is always advisable to bring all these people on board on the project at an earlier stage of the project itself, so that they are in the alignment of the design process, the user need and the overall concept that the architect has in mind. It should be an inclusive perspective. So, aspects of design process is something which also includes the principles of inclusivity. Inclusivity means it should be for everybody. So, to have this perspective, the architect needs to gather different ideas. He needs to address the importance of accessibility. We did in the previous lectures. Accessibility is something which helps the people to reach that place comfortably and soundly. the sustainability factor. The project, the output should be in such a way that it is sustainable and matters for each and every person. The culture and the environmental aspect are also the factors which makes the whole design inclusive. So, inclusivity is the aspect that helps the architect to gather all these ideas and bring it on the common platform for the design to be a successful one. So, collaborative practice is another aspect of the design process. The architect needs to work with the engineers, builders and contractors to ensure the feasibility and the practicality and efficiency of the project. All these factors help to work out the final outcome. Outcome is that design that are functional, innovative and contribute positively to the community and the city. Final outcome is not just a building in which the people will stay, it becomes a home for the user, it becomes the home for the client, and all these factors help the architect to design the residence in a functional and a fruitful way. So, importance of basic design understanding is something that every architect and every designer has to keep in mind. So, foundation of every design proposal and its execution is very important, and the design process will help the architect and the designer to make the design process functional and its execution becomes easier in the long run. Essential knowledges are very much important to follow throughout the design process. They are the basic design principles of proportion, scale, form, functions. So, elements and principles of design help the designer to formulate a concrete foundational base of concept on which the design can follow. It should follow the spatial relationships such as the circulation, hierarchy and zoning aspects. It again furthermore strengthens the overall design and the layout becomes more feasible and functional. It ensures clarity and feasibility of the architectural projects. So, architecture design has three important stages. The first stage of the architectural design is understanding of the design, defining its scope, then making out the design proposal which leads to the final execution. So, these three processes are the three steps which cannot be evaded. So, understanding of design is defining scope. Defining scope means to understand what is the user need, what is the preference, where the design is going to happen, what would be the scale of the design and all these aspects. From the understanding, the architect works on the design proposal. What is the actual requirement, actual list of things and an area formulation is done and then the final execution happens. So, now we will do one by one elaborative explanation of all the three process. So, understanding of the design process is not just defining the scope, it happens in 7 different stages. The 7 stages of design processes start with the problem definition, understanding what the problem is, what is the site, what is the location, what is the scale, what is the size, what is the requirement of the user. All these helps the architects and the designers to formulate the problem, and the definition of this problem is the list which comes through the further stages, which are data collection and analysis. Data collection is done through the iterative process of user need, requirement, norm, standards, what is happening, what is existing, all these done in the data collection process. And once all these data is collected, analysis of this data happens, which helps in the concept development, and once the concept development is done, a schematic design is evolved. Through the schematic design, a proper design development happens, which is further strengthened and reinforced by detailing and documentation, which leads to execution and the feedback. So, the 7 stages which are mentioned here right now are problem definition, data collection and analysis, concept development, schematic design, design development, detailing and documentation, execution and feedback. So, all these 7 processes are interlinked to each other. As we have already discussed, this is not a linear process. Design is a non-linear process and it's an iterative process. So, all these 7 things become a circle in which if there is any abnormality, again you come back to the previous step, again reinforce it and then proceed to the further processes. So, problem definition becomes the foundation of all design processes. Data collection helps give you the information what has to be done and how it has to be done. The analysis of this data helps you to come to a result which helps you in developing the concept, deciding how the design will move further, and the concept becomes the platform for the schematic design. Schematic design is basically the layout, what space is going to be placed in which area of the overall site. This helps in the working of the design development, in which furthermore detailing is done, that what is the material, what is the layout, what are the size, what is the spatial requirement, and the documentation process in terms of plans, elevations, sections, detailings, 3D helps in the execution in a better way. Once all these work is done, feedback is a very important level in which the client comes in. All these designs and documents are discussed with the client and a feedback is taken, and if there is requirement, again an iterative process starts. So, this keeps on going on. So, to and fro between 1 to 7 or between 2 and 4 keeps on happening throughout the design journey. So, the 7 processes involved in the previous 7 stages are important. They are pre-design, schematic design, design development, construction document, building permit, bidding and negotiation, and construction. Pre-design involves defining of the problem, collection of the information. Schematic design helps to do the brainstorming and analysis. So, between the pre-design and the schematic design, the client feedback is very important and the client involvement is very important. I would suggest all the young designers to always incorporate the people who are impacted by the design very early on the design development stages. So, all the consultants that are going to be working on the design should be onboarded on an earlier stages itself before you start working with the design development. So, schematic design is the time where brainstorming and analysis of the whole design is being done, and from that the design development will be worked out, and feedbacks, whatever feedbacks you are getting on the schematic design process should be incorporated during the design development process, because once the construction documents are made, they are sent for the permission to the different authorities, and the changes are not possible or any iterations is not possible. So, the first 2 steps, that is the pre-design and the schematic design, is the time when the most of the client involvement and the onboarding of various consultants should be taken care of. Once the building permit is available, is granted from different authorities, bidding and negotiation for the construction process started. Bidding means that every design, every plan ultimately has to be constructed in a physical manner on the site. So, the bidding and negotiation for the contractors and the people who are going to actually build will be starting. So, when there is a residential project, depending upon the scale, people hire the contractors, or the real estate companies have their own in-house team who work on these aspects. And finally, the construction process starts. So, let us discuss each of these processes one by one in detail, because as designers, our main responsibility lies in the pre-design, schematic design, design development and making the construction document ready for the building permit. So, dear learners, let's delve into each of these processes one by one. Pre-design is basically your research work. Research work means understanding what is happening behind the requirements. So, definition of the problem is done through collection of all the information that is available to you, and these information is something you get from your clients, studying the existing scenarios, understanding the site context, understanding the literature. We have already discussed about the anthropometrical requirement in our previous lectures. So, all these aspects now become the parameters of your information that you need to collect. And the stronger the research work, the better definition of problem will be done. The stronger the collection of information, you will be able to do a better design aspect. So, problem definition has three important aspects. First aspect is to identify what the client needs, what are his aspirations, what he wants to do. Second is defining the scope and objective. It's very important, dear learners, to identify the scope and the objectives. When architects do the design, many a times they go overboard in working out their scope and objectives. That is something which should be decided at the very initial stage of the design process. Then also discuss the constraint, the budget and the site bylaws with your clients, which is something very important, because every project, every building, every house that we are going to make will have some costing to it. Let's take a small example, like a family of 4 wants a climate responsive 3 BHK on a 200 square meter plot. So, here we have constraints and the definition of problems that are: first, the land size, that is 200 square meter plot. Second, they want 3 BHK, that means 3 bedroom, 1 hall and 1 kitchen, and the number of users are 4. So, here we have 3 constraints directly onto us, that is the number of family members is 4, the number of rooms that they want is bare minimum 3, and the overall size of the plot is 200 square meters. In addition to these constraints, it is important to understand what are the client aspiration, which is here in this example given by climate responsive. So, climate responsive design takes a furthermore challenging concept and design aspirations which need to be incorporated in the design and overall layout of the project. Second important part becomes the data collection and analysis. This requires client discussions, literature review, site information, case studies and user analysis. Client discussion helps to understand what are the client aspirations. Like we discussed in the previous example of the 3 BHK, it helps us to understand what is the overall requirement of the client, what are his aspirations, because for architects, designers and contractors, the project is the residence, but for the users and your client, it is their home that they are building. So, it is very important for the architects and the designers to consider this aspect, that yes, we are doing a project, but for our clients it is their home that we are designing, and that home would be for them through the rest of their lives. So, for this aspiration, it is very important that the architect and the designers does the data collection on a very strong way, and the analysis of that data conducted is to be something which has to be implied in the overall design and its process. Literature review of the requirements, the study of the standards, the guidelines, the norms and the anthropometry helps the architect to work out the overall requirements of the design. Site information like site analysis, which gives the area dimensions, orientations, climate, typology, or all the aspects which help to understand the site. In our upcoming lectures, we will talk in detail about the site analysis processes. Another important aspect is the case study, that is to understand what is happening in the market currently. So, similar residences, similar projects are taken into consideration, and the user analysis, which gives which is given through the lifestyle pattern, the anthropometrics, the ergometrics. So again, client discussion comes here to play a very important role. Then comes the stage of schematic design. From the data that you have collected, you work out the proposal and the concept. The proposal and the concept will help you to make the schematic design. Schematic design is achieved through the data you have collected, the contextual approach of the design, and the overall process of the evaluation of the initial proposal. So, formulation of proposal starts from the research to the proposal. It is the transition from data collection, concept generation. Research and proposal stages may overlap, but overall work is to start working on the design proposal at this stage. Concept development basically means translate needs insight into the design idea, functional climatic thematic concepts, tools, bubble diagrams, sketches, models. For example, a courtyard house is a very good example for a concept development in a hot and humid climate. So, that is all, dear learners, for today. We will continue with the concept development in our upcoming lecture. Thank you so much.